All right, on today's show, we're going to talk about two-factor authentication. This is something I think that's so critical for each and every one of y'all when it comes to your account safety when you're on the web, okay? I can't stress enough that you need a mechanism to help minimize the chance that your accounts are going to be compromised. And that's what two-factor authentication is all about. This is something that you need to do on every single account that you have that supports two-factor authentication. It's not difficult. It just provides an additional layer of security to each of these accounts, okay? So before I get started on this topic, I want you to understand that this sounds very complex, sounds very complicated, but once you start using it, you'll see that it's really easy to set it up and how to use it. Listen, it all sounds like geek speak. Don't get scared away. I'm telling you, at the end, it's all going to make sense to you, okay? All right, so let's get going with this topic. So what is 2FA? Or you may even hear the term multi-factor authentication. 2FA just stands for two-factor authentication. I'm going to go through that with you as far as what it means. Not complex. Again, just a little bit of geek speak. So we're going to talk about how to set it up and why you should be using it, all right? In my opinion, our current system of using usernames and passwords is broken, okay, folks? It's broken. There are too many ways that someone can get your password, all right? So if they get your username and your password, and listen, most sites, most people already have your username. It's your email address, right? So they already have 50% of what they need to get into your account. Passwords, listen, there's a lot of data breaches going on out there. And these data breaches, these databases that are being stolen, they have passwords that you've used before. So if I know what your email address is, I may end up using a password that is, that has been used in one of these data breaches, and I may be able to get access to your account. So we need to make sure you get an extra layer of protection on there. All right. Most of you are not practicing good password procedures, okay? You're using simple passwords out there. You're using password. You're using 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. How do I know that? Because when they find these big databases that have been stolen, what do they see? Most of the users are still using things like password for the password, okay? It's easy for you to remember. That's why you're using it, because you're trying to use something that's easy for you to remember. And even worse, you know what you're doing? You're using that same password on all of your sites. That's right. You're using the same password on multiple sites. So if I'm the bad guy and I compromise your account, then that means that I'm going to use that information in those other databases that I've taken. And by the way, it's not that I have to be the guy doing the heavy lifting and breaking in to get these databases. This stuff is for sale, and in some cases it's free on the internet, right? So there are companies out there, not companies, there are groups that have gone through and hacked into companies. They steal all this data, and then they put it up for sale. $5, $10, $15. So somebody gets access to these databases. They see your name is John Smith at xyz.com and that you use password for your password. They're just going to start going down all the big sites, right? They're going to go to Facebook. They're going to go to all the different banks and so forth. And they're going to try to use your username that they've stolen from or that they've picked up from one of these databases. And they're going to use the passwords that are in these databases. And next thing you know, they're in one of these other accounts, okay? You want to use good passwords. You don't want to use the same password at every site. More importantly, we want to get 2FA, two-factor authentication, set up so that if someone does get your information, that you can help protect these accounts by having this additional layer. All right, so what is two-factor or multi-factor authentication? For starters, these terms are used interchangeably. You know, some companies call it 2FA, some call it multi-factor. If you see that term, it's going to typically mean the same thing. Two-factor authentication is a process that requires two distinct forms of identification, okay? So this can be something that you know, like a password or a PIN number, okay? Additional information can be something that you have, like a phone or hardware key. Okay, hardware key, if you, in some of your offices out there, maybe if you log into your bank, they'll have a little key fob that you use, and that key fob is then, it has a number on it, and you press a button and it gives you a number that's good for 60 seconds. Okay, so that would be, it's like a hardware key. Your phone can also fall into a hardware key, where you would have a piece of software that will generate a code, and that code's good for 60 seconds, and then it renews itself. It also, another thing is something that you are, like a biometric, okay? It could be a fingerprint or a face scan. So now you got a username, which in my opinion is pretty much worthless, because most companies want your email address for your username. I'm starting to see some companies now that they're setting up usernames, it's not your email address, okay? And so, but for the most part, most people are using their email address for their username. So that's pretty much, you know, you can't really protect that, because every time you send somebody an email, they've got your email address, right? So passwords are something that hopefully you're using good passwords. We've got a video. We'll link to that below, where you can watch our show on passwords, how to set up a good password. So biometrics, again, could be that other item, that other identification option, which is going to be, you know, that fingerprint or facial recognition. So if you're trying to log into a website, and let's say I'm able to get access to your username and your password, well, when I go to log in and you have two-factor authentication set up, well, some companies will send you a text and say, here's your code. Some of them have apps that you can use, and these apps will generate that code for you. I'm not even aware of any site that even charges for this, okay, for either for the apps or for using two-factor authentication. So it really is kind of a no-brainer. And once you start using it, you're going to find that it's going to make life very, very easy for you. All right, so we need to kind of break this down and understand what all this means, okay? Something that you know. This is something like a password, okay? It could be a PIN number. So you put in your username, you put in your password. And when they say two-factor, what they're saying is your username and your password is not considered two factors, okay? So it's something you know, something you have, something that you are. It's got to be one of each of those categories. Something that you know, something that you are, something that you have. So we'll go through that. So you use your username, and then, you know, a password, and then one of the other two categories. And if you do that, again, it's supposed to help minimize the chance that somebody's going to get access into your account. So this is typically, when you use something like a password, this is typically what you use when logging into sites like, you know, social media, your bank, and, you know, shopping and so forth, right? Something that you have, that's where the cell phone now comes in, or maybe that USB key that I was telling you about earlier, or just the key itself. It provides that additional credential, right? So I use those all the time. On my phone, I have a couple of apps that generate 6 digits or 6 numbers that when I log into a website, then I go into the little app and it says, use this code for Facebook, or use this code for your bank, or use this code for whatever it is that I'm going into. So now I've got a username and password, and then I have to get that code. You can also get it, some sites will set up text messages that you can use as well. Very short story. We get folks coming in, mainly ladies will come in and say, listen, I think my boyfriend or somebody, maybe a husband or somebody's tracking me, and they show up in places they shouldn't be showing up. The only way they know stuff that they know is they've had to gone into my account. So what we do is we set them up for two-factor. And early on, you know, it was mainly just text messages. So They would put in their username and their password. They'd get a text. The text would then give them a number. They put that in, and now they can log in. Well, a couple days would go by, and we would get a call. And they would say, you know, this isn't really working. Something's wrong with this. I need you to take this off of my account. Okay, well, what's going on? Well, I just keep getting random text messages that says, here's your text message to log into Facebook. And I said, oh, it's working just like it's supposed to. And they're like, what? Yeah. So what's happened is somebody knows your username and your password. They're trying to log in and is sending you the code. That code is what's stopping them from getting into the account. It's working. Then they're going, oh man, that's cool. So they're happy. They leave it on the account. All right, moving back to the topic. Something that you are. This can be something like biometrics, right? A lot of phones today have cameras. You can go ahead and log in. You can look at the camera, put in your username, your password, look at the camera, and that's got your biometrics right there. Could be a fingerprint, where you're using a fingerprint, username, password, and a fingerprint to get in. I'm not overly fond with these, with the biometric parts, because it's not necessarily that they're easy to crack, but there have been some cases where some people could use different faces and still get in there. Something you know, I just mentioned that a password is something you know. Password requirements are getting more complex and can be difficult to remember. Some sites have even started using PIN numbers, which usually only consist of 4 or 6 numbers. So unfortunately, many people are still using the same password, or even worse, the password across multiple sites, as we mentioned. So again, it makes more sense for you to use this two-factor authentication. All right. So under the section under something that you have, this is one of the new exciting parts of adding an additional security layer to protecting your account. Something you have can be that cell phone, which we just talked about. And I want you to take away today that when you go in to set this up, I would prefer that you use the cell phone method, where you use an app to generate that code, okay? What that is that when you go into the app, one of my favorites is called Authy, A-U-T-H-Y, Authy. You can download the app for free. When you go into sites, they're going to let you typically use, there's many different ones out there, but you use this app. It's going to generate a QR code. It really is simple. You set up the app, you tell on the site, I want to enable two-factor authentication on the account. It says, cool, scan this code with your phone. Beep. You're done. That's it. From that point forward, when you go to that site, you're going to put in your username and your password. It's going to then say enter your code. So now you put your code in from the app and you're done. 60 seconds later, that number changes, or even better, once you use a code, it's no longer any good. All right? So, the apps. We'll talk a little bit more about that in just a few minutes on which apps you can use. All right, so we're talking about these apps that you can use on your mobile device. You can use it, whether it's your iPhone or your Android phone, your iPad, and so forth. I mentioned Authy, AUTHY.com. Google has one, which is very popular. It's the Google Authenticator. You can get that off the Google site. Microsoft has an authenticator that you can use. What's nice is, like Authy, for the most part, Authy and the Google Authenticator are the two that I use the most, mainly because those are the ones that typically work with many different sites that are out there. And so instead of having to have one for every single site, which would be kind of crazy going into all these different apps, you can use a single app, or in some cases it may require 2 apps in order to get this set up. So if you're doing Amazon purchasing and so forth, or you're banking, and any of these really critical sites, email, if your email, if all accounts supports it, that's one of the ones you really want to make sure you're protecting. Why is that? Well, listen, if I can get access to your email, I can pretty much access everything about you, right? And the other thing is that if I can get access to your email and I now have, I get access, I go to these websites and I'm like, I don't remember my password. Where's it going to send that password reset link? It's going to send it to your email. Well, if I have access to your email, I'll just wait till you go to bed, go out there and say I forgot my password. It's going to send that password reset to your email. I have access to your email. I go out there, click on the link, change that password to that site to whatever I want. I've locked you out. I have control of it. You're in trouble. So email is one of those things that you really, really want to protect with two-factor authentication. Let's talk about one-time use codes. So let's say if you're on a plane, okay, or you lost your phone, you can't get authenticated, right? It's sending you don't have the app, you don't have text messaging. Well, this is where one-time use codes can come in. Now, a one-time use code, typically these sites will allow you 12 codes or 10 codes or 5, whatever the site is. You want to print these out. Put them in a safe place, right? So that way if you do lose your phone quits working, battery dies, you're on a plane, you can't get access to your phone for these apps to work, then the one-time use codes come in. So you can print these out. Again, it depends on the site, but it could be, you get 5, 10, whatever it may be. Get those, print those out. Very important to remember that, again, in case if you end up losing a device or it's just not functioning. All right, let's talk about one-time OTP or one-time PINs. So, you can suppress these requests for the use of a PIN on some of these sites so that you don't have to keep doing this. For instance, if you go to Facebook and you have it set up for a one-time use code, well, if you're using that same computer all the time and you don't want to have to enter that code in every single time on that, say, your home computer, then you can say, remember me on this device. Okay, and then it won't ask you again for you to give it that one-time use code. All right. I'm a security nut, so even at my own computer, at my desk, at my office, whether it's a home computer, whatever it may be, I log out and I want to make sure that I get that one-time use code every single time. So think about that. If you don't like getting one-time use codes on systems that you use all the time, you can suppress that and say don't ask for that. At least it won't annoy you and you'll still get that protection, meaning that if someone does compromise your username and password and they try to get to it from another computer, then it's going to minimize the chance that they're going to be able to get in. The reason why I'm saying minimize that chance is because there's no silver bullet that's going to protect you from everything. So a year from now, 6 months from now, whatever, this could be a technology that doesn't really work anymore. And so that's why I say it can help minimize the chance, all right? Let's also talk real quick about computer cookies that can remember this kind of stuff. One of the problems when you run into this kind of an issue is that these cookies can be actually copied off your computer, dropped on another computer. We call them session cookies, and then somebody can then get into that account without your username, password, or that code, okay? Let me give you an example. There are stories out there of hackers going into coffee shops. And I'm saying coffee shops, but just basically any place that you have public internet access. And when you get on public internet access, if the site doesn't do something called client isolation, that means everybody's in the same pot together. So if a hacker is able to get access to your computer and they can go and find your cookies on your computer, they just simply take your cookie, put it on their computer, go to that website, log in, and it's going to see that the cookie is already there with your username, your password, and that you don't need a one-time use code, and it's going to let somebody write in. So be careful with this kind of stuff when you're telling it to remember you on there. So again, I'm not in favor of using cookies. Remember, for these reasons, be careful with that. Keep that in mind if you're doing a lot of traveling and stuff and you're using public Wi-Fi. You may want to be careful with that. Another thing I also want to mention to you about is logging out of sites when you're done. Always remember to log out of sites when you're done. I can't stress this enough. If you don't, then someone can sit down at the computer, open up that program or that app, and get right into your account. Let me give you an example. Facebook. When you close Facebook on your computer, do you have to enter a username and password to get back in? A lot of sites are like that. What if you go out and use a public computer? What if you're at work and you're using a computer and somebody else is sharing that computer? If you're at home, do you want your kids or somebody else to log in or to sit down at the computer and go to Facebook or some other site and it's already logged in? So log out. Log out of those sites when you're done. Keep that in mind, all right? And if you have any questions about anything we covered today, leave me a comment below and we'll get right to them. All right, we'll see you next time on the Jamey Mellis Show.